Welcome to the Rising Phoenix Show. And so what are we doing today, Tom Corrigan?
Hey, for our lucky guests. Oh, no, that's the wrong show.
Cutco knives. Those are really nice knives, actually, not Ginsu.
We'd like to welcome you here today. We have a special show because we have Josh Allen Dykstra with us. And Chuck's going to interview him. And we're going to talk about some important things about our mindset, about the future. We're also going to have a chance to interact in small groups together about the important stuff that Josh is going to challenge us with. We're also going to take on what we call bottleneck or two. So be thinking about that. A bottleneck would show up in your life as an opportunity, a problem, or a challenge that you could use the wisdom of crowds. And Sandy and I were talking about this morning going, what do you think the reason is more people don't jump in with bottlenecks? We know we all have opportunities, many of them, but, I just wonder, adult learners, we don't want to be found to be less than, or we don't want to think our question is stupid, or we don't want to find somebody to go, well, duh, that's obvious to all the rest of us. You're the only one who has that problem. But none of those exist in this scenario. So let me just wipe those things out. That your challenge, your opportunity, your problem is important, because we say when one person works, we all work, which means when you bring up, there's a whole bunch of other people going,
oh yeah, I have that too.
That's kind of related to that situation in my life, and we all get some value out of it.
I was just reading this morning this really fun book, and the guy's a therapist and he does work with horses, of course. So that's why I was reading the book with people. But he said, we really don't want to ask for help. Like, it's like you say, Chuck, we're all still, no matter what, like the rugged individualists, and we don't want to ask for help. And so this is really a great opportunity for you to be able to ask for some help. And I like what you said, Tom, because when somebody does a bottleneck, I go, oh, I have that too. I have that issue too, or I could have that, or, so just really be thinking about stepping up and helping everybody with your bottleneck today.
That's right.
So the story of the Rising Phoenix is pretty interesting this morning. If you live in maybe the south part of Denver, although you guys in Denver could raise your hand, there's a lot of smoke in the air today from the fires in Arizona and in Pueblo. And so I got up this morning and I'm like, yeah, that's kind of what it feels like if you're a mythical bird that after 100 years settles into kindling to willingly burn up what needs to go. So I didn't have a soundtrack. I got to find that next, but I had the smell to go along with the idea that I'm asking myself, what has to go? And Chuck, we were talking earlier, what has to go to create our new reality? And Josh is going to talk to us about that today. So I don't want new normal, because I'm not a normal person. Like, I don't want to be normal. Does anybody else on this call not want to be normal? No. Right? I equate normal with mediocre, and we're all A students, like Xander says, right? And so what do we have to do to create our new reality, and how could it be the best reality ever? And so I believe that's the story behind our Rising Phoenix, is that bird said, I'm going to have my best reality ever. So one of my favorite people's on the call, and Chuck's going to introduce them, but when I get around Josh, I feel happy. And I feel joyful. And I was thinking, I need to do that one-to-one that we had to reschedule, because I miss you, man. And because Josh is a person that really knows how to exude a tremendous, encouraging kind of energy. And so, Chuck, let's let you and Josh take it from here.
You bet. Glad to be able to do this with you guys this morning. And I'm so excited to have Josh Allen Dykstra on with us today. He's a good friend of mine. We've been knocking around together on this crazy business stuff for quite a few years together, and I've learned a lot from Josh, and we're going to learn some things from Josh again here today. And Josh runs a company called Helios, and it's not a Montana company, but it has to do with big sky. And the Helios means the sun. I think it's Greek for the sun, and for energy, and it's a company that deals with energy. They've got a great application or a great psychobabble test. We've got one of our own psychobabble tests, but I love theirs because most psychobabble tests tell you what you're good at, and theirs tells you what you actually like doing. tell us what your energy is. What energizes you. We may not get into that too much today, but I just wanted to have Josh on to get his perspective, because he has such a great perspective on these kinds of things. And Josh, I want to introduce you and get you flying here today, and we can just have a conversation on what is normal, and what's it look like going forward, and do we ever want normal again? And so I'll just turn it over to you, and I'll just start interrupting you as quickly as I can.
Yeah, sounds good. Everybody hear me okay? Yeah. All right. Look, awesome. Good to be with you all this morning. Thanks for inviting me, Chuck. It's really always a pleasure to hang out with you guys. Yeah, I think this question about the new normal is a really interesting one. And so I know we wanted to chat a little bit about that today. So I don't know if you guys are hearing this phrase a lot. I certainly am. Right, this idea of this new normal, and in some ways it's true, right? In some ways there's a certain newness of reality that we're all experiencing. But I tend to hate this phrase. I tend to hate this phrase, the new normal, and I'll tell you why. The reason is because when we say something like the new normal, I think what we're doing probably unconsciously. We're maybe unaware of what we're doing with this language, but the framing of the new normal puts us in the receiving seat, right? It puts us in the seat of, I guess this new thing is just going to happen, and then I'm going to have to deal with it, whatever it is. But this kind of framing, I believe, is a complete misunderstanding about how the future actually works, right? The future isn't a predetermined anything. The future is just a bunch of possibility that lives out there. And the way the future actually gets created is by the actions that we're all doing right now. And so the reality is that we could co-create a next normal, right? And so I like that phrasing much better. I think that language much more appropriate. Because I think too, what Sandy was saying, what Chuck was saying, right? A lot of us don't want to go back. Like the last normal wasn't all that great for a whole lot of us, right? It wasn't, certainly when you look at general employee populations out there, right? The way that we work in general, certainly when it comes to, social justice and racial situations, right? Like the last normal was not that great for a whole lot of people. So we ought to create something better. And that's kind of what I would encourage you all to be thinking about, is getting rid of the new normal phrase and creating a next normal instead.
Great way to start, Josh. I think one of the things I've thought about recently, and we've shared this many times in the past, adults don't learn unless we're disoriented. And we've been disoriented. This has been a very positively disorienting thing. And you can look at it as, hey, I don't want to be disoriented. Somebody make something happen to me that brings back my stability.
Right.
And it's happening to me, the new normal, that idea of waiting for something to happen to me so that I'm back to normal, instead of creating what I actually would want if I had a clean slate. What would you be able to do with that? So I think that's a great, it's almost like the new reality, not the new normal. The new reality really could be, what do you want out of life?
Mm-hmm.
And then what do you need to do to get that? Yeah. And then what's standing in your way? And then what's the first thing you could do to make that happen? That to me is a positive, forward-looking way to do this. I think Tom Fanning's on the call. We talked in one of our 3 to 5 clubs, probably in March before we were pushed to Zoom, about the idea of resilience. And Tom, I think you mentioned resilience. Really, the resilience has to do with to bouncing back, but really resilience should be about bouncing forward. And not going back where we came from, and just getting back to where we were. So I love where you're going with this. What are some practical ways do you think we could jump into this, Josh?
Yeah. I think maybe the first step is probably just realizing some things that you were saying, right? It's that a new normal will happen, right? So we can just let it happen to us, right? Other people will be happy to make this decision for us. There's plenty of inertia, and there's plenty of big business to be had by keeping the status quo the way it is, right? So in our work, we talk a lot about the future of work and how we want it to look fundamentally different than what work has been like. And so, yeah, I think the first part is us just kind of realizing that we need to make ourselves active participants in the co-creation of a different future. If we want a different future, we need to make ourselves active participants in co-creating what that is, because otherwise it's just going to, like, other people will be happy to make that decision for us. And generally people with a lot more money than any of us, right? Well, they'll be happy to just kind of try to push us back into this overly consumeristic, overly, environmentally damaging, kind of injustice way of working and living. So I think that's the first thing we got to do is say, and which I think marries really well with the 3 to 5 mindset, right? We need to make our own business rules, right? We need to decide that we want different rules and what those are. So I think in my view, right, this just becomes a natural extension. So to your point, Chuck, what do we do? I think it's the same thing we've been doing, right, in this community. It's trying to push organizations and the way that we're working in a more participative, human conscious way, right? Like it's the same thing we've been doing. It's just that we've been given this kind of cosmic timeout, if you will, right? To like pause and say, right, like the universe, or however you want to look at it, right, is saying, hey, stop. Look at what you're doing. Like, really, is this the way you want to keep doing things? And so I think we've got a moment, everyone in this community, to really say, hey, we've got some ideas for how to do this differently. And we've actually been practicing this for a lot of years, right? In a way, so I've been encouraging the team at Helios to think about it like this. Like, we've kind of been training for this moment. Right? Like so everybody in this community, I think, also has been training for this moment, right? So it's not a question of like doing a bunch of different new stuff. I think it's just a question of us doing more of the stuff we've already been practicing, because we've been training for this.
So what do you think? It's a great perspective on this. Life should be a seminar. It's not about victories and defeats and failures and wins and loses. It's just it's an ongoing learning session, and we've been training. So what are some things you think have equipped us to get to this point? What have we been training on?
Yeah. One of the, so let's see. So I think some of the most important things that we talk about in 3 to 5, and then also in Helios, with, as Chuck mentioned, I think we're really complementary organizations. We've been doing complementary work. I think one of the biggest things is trying to figure out, and even just like running experiments in how to make work less hierarchical, more kind of purpose driven, and more focused on how do we help people stay in their area of highest and best contribution, right? This is a powerful time for that. And what we're seeing, it's just out of control. So if any of you are talking to, and maybe you guys are experiencing this too, but we tend to work with really, really big organizations. So like 1,000 people and larger. And in these companies, especially, for the people that are still there, right, that are not furloughed or whatever, they're working harder than ever, right? Like they're being pushed harder than ever, and they were already at the edge of burnout before, right? Like the topic of burnout is something that we were pushing on before the pandemic, right? And it's just like, what are we doing now to kind of move people into that space? I think we've got an opportunity with this idea of highest and best contribution, right? And especially, and it goes back to your point about energy too, Chuck, right? So that work ought to energize us, right? So this is one of those fundamental kind of shifts that we would contribute to this conversation, is that if work isn't energizing you, then we're doing something wrong, right? That should be a canary in the coal mine. That should be a red flag saying something is misaligned if too much of my work is sucking the life out of me. But that again is a bunch of like head trash story stuff that's kind of been passed down from a lot of generations, right? We think work is supposed to hurt us. Like that's kind of our default state.
You and I've said this from years. Work should not be an interruption, an unwelcome interruption in an otherwise really good day. But that's what it has become for so many people. Oh crap, I have to go to work. Oh good, I'm off work.
Yeah. Yay. Yeah, I guess I can get back to my life, as if most of your life isn't spent at work.
Yeah.
So,
and I think there's an opportunity here for us to talk more about the idea of integration. I think you'll see this mindset over the years, really over the next few months, coming up more and more, that we've got to reintegrate a lot of what we've separated, and work is one of those things we separated. In 1850 was the first time more stuff was made in factories than in homes and shops above your house. It was the first time we actually went to work.
Right.
And we separated work from the rest of our lives. And we've ever since been separating things out and putting them in little tiny little buckets all by themselves and trying to keep them separated. And it's just unhealthy. And this is another one of those. I think we need to integrate work. How do we integrate work back into the rest of our lives so that it's not an interruption, it's a seamless part of who we are. I think this is an opportunity to do that, where a lot of us are working from home, so we're learning how to integrate from that perspective. And then I think this is an opportunity to reintegrate people with their brains at work.
Yeah. I think another continuation of the things you've been teaching for a long time, Chuck, is this idea of letting people be adults at work, letting people actually be the grown-ups they are. Right. And we're seeing just an enormous experiment in that play out right now, right? Like it's pretty hard to quote manage somebody when you can't see them and they're actually working from home. Right. So in a way, the whole workplace got forced into this big social experiment around, okay, can these people actually get work done if I'm not like lording over them, creepily lurking in the background?
Although there are some companies, I saw this, you probably saw, some of you guys have probably seen this as well. Just 2 weeks ago, I saw a 5-minute news clip on companies that have installed software. The snooping software stuff has just gone nuts, and there's people actually who have installed information or apps on your computer that allow them to open up your camera and look at you anytime they want during the business day to make sure you're still sitting there. Here's just a thought. If you work for one of those companies, you can do this during the call or right after the call, but you should start your resignation letter.
Seriously.
And find somewhere else, because this is creepy stuff. But it's also showing how insecure many companies are. Holy crap, we can't control these people. They're at home. We need to make sure they're not playing with their dog or doing their laundry.
Right.
So Josh, have you noticed that some people are happier and more joyful since working from home?
Yeah, we've heard stories on kind of all sides of this, right? I think there's a lot of complex emotions kind of mashed together, right? Because on the one hand, I think it's probably a little bit of a lot of those things. So some people are very much like, this has been great, right? I don't miss my commute, right? I like seeing my kids more, and I like more flexibility, right? So all of those things I like, and right, then there's a whole other mixed bag of this, because it's like I don't know how to do this with my kids here all the time, right? I don't know how to focus and separate and get space from that. And then I feel guilty if I'm not paying attention to them too much, and I feel guilty if I am, because then I'm ignoring my work, and right. And so it's this whole other can of worms that I'm guessing a lot of you are experiencing too.
And I think on top of that, that's a great question, Sandy. I think another piece of this is actually a lot of people want to be able to use their brains and have been able to do so from home, but the majority of us actually were taught not, over the last 150 years, to not use our brains at work. That it just wasn't safe to do that. That's what managers are for. Yeah. And if I make decisions, I'm going to either step on their toes and threaten them, and then I'm going to be on their wrong side, or I'm going to be responsible for something. I know what that's like at work. I don't want to be responsible for something, because now they can fire me. So I'll just keep my head down and do what I'm told. And some of us chop at the bits of that, and some people are just the opposite. They need to be retaught how to take all of that adultness that they have outside of work, where they buy houses and buy cars and get relationships and marriages and careers, all these huge decisions they're making, and relearn how to use that at work. And it's uncomfortable to begin with, to have to reintegrate my adulthood back into work and go there with the idea that I'm going to be rehumanized by making decisions.
Yeah. It's one of the great things about this moment, right? I think it's, so some folks, I've seen some folks who study this say that we've been pushed forward, like the work from home aspect of this, for example, the adoption of that technology has been pushed forward a decade, right? In the period of about 2 or 3 months, right? So what would have taken 10 years, right, is now just kind of, right? So there's something really good about that, right? And to your point, Chuck, about kind of adults not learning unless we're disoriented, right? Like there's an opportunity here for us to learn some really big things really quickly if we're open to that, I think.
Yeah. So we need to be looking for that. So jump in with questions or thoughts for this. You can do it either through chat or just hit your space bar. If you're on mute, hit your space bar and hold it down while you're talking, and then just let go when you're done. So I'll start us off with one. Tom Fanning put this in the chat box. Josh, are you saying that folks who have not been laid off are also over the edge, just getting their work done now, along with all the other work from home that they had before?
Yeah, I think that's the sentiment that I'm feeling, is that especially in some of these organizations, right, that are really still thriving right now, they feel this additional pressure, right, to keep up, right? So a company like Amazon, right, like just, going bonkers crazy, and the people inside it are just feeling like they're being pushed then even further, right? Because they're feeling really grateful that they have jobs, right? So they want to keep their job and they want to keep working, and so they put all that extra pressure on themselves, and then there's really just a lot of business for them to kind of keep, right? So it's just like this kind of piling on of pressures. And so what we're seeing is that wise leaders are deliberately starting to counteract this, because they can see the burnout happening, right? I've almost even started to say that this is less about burnout than it is about burning, right? Like these people are on fire, right? Like this is really serious, and they feel like they're on fire, and they feel like there's no relief. Because they go from one high pressure situation to the next, and then they've got to deal with the kids and all of that situation on top of a pandemic, which is already stressful, blah, blah, blah. So for people who are on fire, right, like the wise leaders are starting to say, how do we slow this down? How do we deliberately counteract this with healthier work practices, which is kind of where we come in and help.
Peter Brissett says, I've heard comments from managers that they're so worried that people are working from home and just goofing off all day and want to get back in. They want to get them back into the office so they can keep an eye on them. So sad. I think that speaks to a culture, but it also speaks to a mindset about humanity that we have an opportunity here to disrupt. There was, it just wasn't there until 1850, and really starting in the late 1700s. Somewhere around 80 to 90% of all free people in the history of the world owned their own business. There was nobody working, seeing if they were goofing off all day and trying to get them into an office so they could keep them working. Somewhere between 80 to 90%. Today, it's just the opposite. Somewhere around 15% own their own business. But it's in our DNA to be adults and to do our work and to not have to be told or supervised to get it done. Please help me figure out what I need to get done. Help me figure out what result I want, and help me figure out the process and all that. But you don't need to stand over me. And I just think this is a real opportunity to take advantage of it, because now there's a lot of managers who have been disoriented, and they're out there saying, how do I control these people? Well, maybe I don't have to. Well, then how do I make them productive? Well, maybe you don't have to. That's one of the studies that's been out, was repeated studies, every study on working from home. For all of you, you can spread this around to your friends who have managers who are afraid of them working from home. Every study that has been done on this, asking the question, are people productive from home? The reality of it is they are more productive at home than they are in the office. Every single study comes back, they're more productive. What they aren't is more collaborative. They're actually more creative at home and they're more productive at home, but they are not more collaborative at home. So they can get a great idea at home, be creative, but then it's really good to get on Zoom or to get into some environment with other human beings and say, hey, I got this great idea. What should I do with it? That's really, there's nothing wrong with being at work. That's a really good piece of it.
I want to jump in on this because I started thinking about what you said about, 1850 was the first time people left. And I think about, are we thinking about all the benefits for our families with us working at home? Are we, I remember going to the little store in my town and having the butcher and the grocer's kids running around the store and helping and learning the business along, with their dad and mom. And, I wonder if we're taking into account the benefit of what our kids could be learning or what our families, what the environments could be like if we did more incorporation. I've always hated this compartmentalization where it's I go away from my family and I work, and then I come home and I'm with my family and try not to work or whatever. And I just think we maybe have some opportunities here we're not even exploring.
And the whole summary of that was, how was your day at work? Fine. Moving on.
Yeah.
No integration whatsoever.
I got through it.
But it made a big shift for companies, right? Whenever Megan's not on video, comes in here on our Zoom calls and crawls all over her, I'm smiling when my dog jumps in on a Zoom, there's all these kind of cool things that have lightened our day and created a better, I guess, joy and opportunity. And I wonder if we're there yet, or if we're willing to be there. Josh, I don't know what you think about that, but.
Yeah. I think we're seeing that, at least in this category of workers, right? So there's a whole segment of workers that don't have those choices, right? Which is another thing we're seeing right now, in society we need to deal with, right? There's a lot of folks who can't work from home, mostly a lot of our essential workers, for example, right? So that's a different conversation. But yeah, I think the folks who are in this category that can work from home, I think this does bring a lot of levity to life, and it does start the reintegration process that Chuck mentions, right? When kids are just jumping on, right? It's just this is life. And it does provide something really kind of wonderful if we let it, right? This is where it all kind of comes back to perspective too, right? And I think it also comes back to the question of burnout, because if I'm at the edge of the cliff, or if I'm at the end of my rope, I don't have a lot of patience when a kid jumps in on my call, right? I don't find the joy in that, right? And so, right, if my batteries aren't charged, I can't see that perspective, right? And so this again is an opportunity for us to start to address the very human side of work, is because unless we feel like we have enough rest and recovery time, we physically don't have the resources to see that perspective that I think you're illuminating, Sandy.
Well, I think what I'd love to do is, Tom, you're going to have some questions for people to talk through this. I'd love to have some small group conversation on this stuff and then get back together. But what I'm hearing, Josh, is kind of a summary going into our groups. Don't be waiting around for the new normal. That's you sitting around waiting for life to happen to you. And let's live life on purpose. We have an opportunity here to actually make our future, make our life, make our new reality. Yeah. Let's be proactive and ask ourselves, what do I want out of this life? How do I get it? What do I need to do first? What's standing in my way? There's an obstacle, there's an opportunity. What is it? So, let's jump into some small groups here. Tom, you got a question or two to guide us in that?
I do. Thanks, Josh. Well, you gave us a lot to talk about. I'm gonna move us into maybe one or two-part question. And the first one is, and I'm going to post this to everybody. What have I learned about myself and my leadership during this time? Because we have had the big pause, right? Maybe you've just had to work harder. But nonetheless, that probably revealed some things about yourself. It has certainly about me and how I'm leading other people. And then the second part, going back to something else you said, Josh, is, am I working out of my highest and best design? the focus sometimes is get all of our people into that place, but leaders lead. You know, if I'm not working out of my highest and best, it's really harder to invite other people into that place. So what have I learned about myself and my leadership? And then am I working for my highest and best design? We're going to pop you into groups here for a few minutes, and please accept the invitation to go there, because your insight is important to the other people you'll be with.
Yeah, so let's just get into groups for like 6 minutes, which will be a very short period of time, and just take these questions or anything else you want to discuss, and then we'll come back out of it and have people from some of the small groups just share with the whole group some things that might be beneficial for all of us to hear. We didn't get a chance to hear in your small group. So opportunity to dig into these questions a little bit more for us. So Megan's going to pop us into the groups, and then it'll pop us right out, or you can opt back into the big group whenever you want. All right, we got most everybody back. Who wants to share something that they did in their small group that would just be helpful for all of us to hear? Love to kind of wrap this up with some of that.
Well, we heard in our group, and I never heard it quite put this way, deadlines aren't a thing anymore.
Deadlines aren't a thing anymore. Huh. What do you mean?
Well, it was Christy who shared it in our group, but it's the same thing I think we're all experiencing, is that you put down deadlines and you say, here's the thing to do, and yet there's so many examples of things that are still occurring that it's like, well, that wasn't a good deadline. That wasn't a great deadline, but still the attempt to lead from the standpoint of not, beating people over the head because of deadlines.
Yeah.
Ever. Yeah.
Yeah, I think to me, deadlines have always been more like waypoints. They've been a way to measure if you're getting progress. And that's a great way to put it. Nobody died if you lost this deadline. It's just, you learn from it and you put together a new waypoint to see how to measure your progress. That's great. Anybody else?
One thing we were talking about, and this has always been a curious thing for me. So I was in an office, now I'm working from home again, which I did for a long time before I had the office. And my team's always worked remotely. And I haven't always thought of ways to do this, but especially when you've had a corporate environment where people are working closely together and collaborating, and then you separate everybody, like the individual work is great, but how do you maintain that collaboration piece? And we kind of hinted on that earlier. I know one person I had talked to, like her company will provide like, group training sessions, via Zoom for like yoga. They'll bring a yoga instructor in and do yoga class together.
Nice.
As a group. So I think that collaboration piece is one of the fears that companies have of how do you maintain that? And for especially people that are social, I mean, most of us are social creatures, even if we're introverts or whatever, that doesn't take away that social need that we have. And so how do we do things outside of just our work? That's only one piece of, who we are as humans. But how do we do these other things and get creative with the medium if we are working from home? But we need that collaboration and creativity that we get off of that energy from working with each other. So
yep, totally agree.
We got to figure out, I guess.
Yeah, new balance. All right. Well, good. Well, this has been fun. Thank you so much, Josh, for stimulating us with this. I think that's just a great message to go out into this week with is let me create my new reality. Let's forget new normal and let me figure out what I want and go forge ahead and create it myself. I've gotten to the point where instead of waiting for trouble to come find me, I think I'm just going to go create my own. Just go look for things to do and it'll come with its own trouble, and that'll be a good thing. So love it. Well, we're going to have Sandy, you're going to have some people revisit their bottlenecks, and we have a great new one coming up.
Well, yeah, we don't have the people who did our bottleneck on last week, but I'm going to ask John Dowling to come on video because John has a pretty cool thing that he's doing. And I don't know, John, if you want to do a bottleneck around it, but would you mind coming on and talking about how you created something new in this time period? I know you're muted and I can't see you. There you are.
My bandwidth is quite limited here at home. So I got to do what I can. Yeah, so what we've been thinking a lot about is homeschooling. And in our life, our kids are upstairs from us. My wife is 10 feet from me here in the basement, and we're both working from home. And you know what that really means for the future. You know, the school districts until last week haven't provided any real direction, I should say, or any real certainty of what they're going to be doing or how they're going to reopen. They've finally done that late last week, and not in a surprising manner entirely. But so anyway, one of the things I've always thought is that the public school system and education in this country is just kind of inherently flawed for a number of reasons. And, you know, I love the Sudbury model in a lot of ways and not in others. And so what we've been thinking about is how to kind of change that up. You know, how can we improve education for the middle students that don't really qualify for G&T and don't want to be wasting their days on the kids with bad behavior and other things like that, and trying to solve teacher pay not being as high as teachers would like. And so we've kind of come up with this model of basically homeschooling in small groups with a shared teacher. And in terms of business structure, kind of mimicking Kaiser Permanente, where there's a nonprofit entity that has a bunch of members or a bunch of, you know, students and families that pay into that nonprofit entity, and then a separate entity that employs the professionals that would employ the teachers. And you know, thoughts being either that entity being teacher owned or that entity just having a big profit share for those teachers. You know, it doesn't. Our initial thoughts have gotten very positive feedback from a number of teachers and families and other parties. But you know, it doesn't solve a lot of issues that still exist in society, like educational disparity, food insecurity, you know, kids with special needs or whatever else. But we think it does really enhance education and improves the socio-emotional environment. It can help the focus return to education, can create individual learning plans, and it can alleviate disruptive behavior.
All right, so John, what would be the bottleneck question you'd love us to solve with you? Because I think we'll get some of these answers as we get people to answer your questions as well.
Yeah, so one of the questions that I would really have is, how would you go about trying to solve educational disparity between socioeconomic classes and racial lines within a small group of a community?
Okay, so you might have a community of 6 or 8 or 10 or 15 kids with 4 or 5 or 6 families who do their own homeschooling, pass it around, and your question would be, how do you make sure you don't end up with some kind of homogenous group that doesn't interact with the rest of the world around them?
Exactly.
Okay, so just a couple minutes for questions for him. Either hit your space bar and chime in that way, or put them in the chat box. It's quicker if you just hit your space bar, but if you're shy, put it in the chat box. Questions for John? We just have a minute and a half here to ask him some questions to clarify, to make sure we understand his bottleneck. Don't be giving solutions yet. Just ask him questions. We'll give solutions in a minute.
John, any specific age groups? Is that defined yet?
Under 12 years old, because we would need to get a exception to some daycare regulations, and they have a cutoff at 12 years old.
Who would be feeding curriculum to these families?
Well, you know, it's interesting. Homeschool doesn't really have any required curriculum, but the thought is with licensed teachers, they would bring that with them and with the family's input. So it can be pretty well guided. And then this entity that employs the teachers would have subscriptions to the pre-existing curriculums and other resources.
And Peter said, have you put any numbers to budget or costs yet?
Yes, we have, and it seems as if it could work out just below a private school level of tuition, including 1 in 8 kids going free, where a teacher could make more money. But it's not as low as I would like to see. You know, my goal is $1,000 per student per month for the school year, but that just seems infeasible. It seems it's going to be more like $1,500 a month, and that's right around private preschool pricing.
Great. And there's a couple of other questions in the chat box in here, but we're going to move to some solutions just time-wise. And you can mute yourself, John, because you don't have to reply at this point.
I think we can answer Kim's real quick. Would it be single location, or does the teacher rotate? The kids would all be in one place together, right?
Yeah, it would be pretty much, they'd all be together physically, and the 6 or 8 families, whatever, could work that out if they want to rotate weekly, or if they just want to stay in the same place for the entire school year, monthly.
And there are other models like this where kids from 4 to 19 years old, 150 plus of them get in one room together. And those 85% of them go on to higher education, Harvard and other places. I just put that in the box here. So this is a good, legitimate model to have kids of different ages all in one room schoolhouse again. All right, so questions? I'm sorry, answers, solutions for John, and he's not allowed to talk now, so you can't, just the opposite. You can't ask him questions. Just give him your thoughts on how he could help make this work without it becoming some kind of homogenous thing.
How about using principals to help set up the system, or administrators or people that have advanced degrees but don't necessarily want to be part of the regular school system, or they've gotten beyond it?
I'd go to the school districts as well and see if you can't claw back some of the money you would put into the school districts to do this, and then use that for scholarships. Somebody said, I homeschooled 5 kids over a 13-year period. Multiple levels can share the subject matter at different levels. Reach out to diversity organizations and find out who has this in the focus as a part of their ability levels. So be another good one.
What about organizations, corporations, or larger groups that would want to see something more for the children of their people, of their workers?
Yeah, so you're saying go to corporations and see if they'd be willing to do grants for something like this. I was thinking of Kickstarter or GoFundMe or something like that to fund something like this, and then keep that as a nonprofit fund for bringing in kids who maybe don't even live in the neighborhood, but would, you have 10 kids and 1 scholarship per group.
Plus one of getting to fund it for their people. Yep.
Yeah.
So we're done. So John, we invite you to come back next week and report in on any of these things you might have pursued, or any additional thoughts you've had on moving forward. And put your contact information in the chat box, John, so if people have other suggestions or want to collaborate with you, they know how to get a hold of you, okay?
Sounds great. I will definitely be following up. Thank you for all your suggestions, everybody.
Thank you, guys. So we're not going to have time for another bottleneck this week, but get ready for next week, because we're going to meet on July 6th. And Chuck, I understand tomorrow is the last day of PPP funding, but there's still EIDL funding out there, and you're going to update the survival guide once more.
Yeah. Yeah, tomorrow is the last day to get PPP. I walked into a coffee shop Saturday and asked this person if they had gotten their PPP loan, and they said no, the owner doesn't want to get it because they don't want to go into debt. And it again reminds me how little information, good information, is out there about this stuff. The PPP loan is essentially going to be a grant. You could get $10,000, $100,000 free from the government to get you past the COVID issues. The possibility that will be a debt is almost 0%. And even if you think it's going to be, you just give it back. So either way, if you have not done that, go get one. They also just reopened the EIDL loan process, disaster loan process, it was just for agriculture again, and now it's reopened to everybody. And I would suggest that you strongly suggest you go get that, even though it is a loan. It's paid back over 30 years. No business loan is paid back over 30 years. So if you're in the U.S., I would strongly encourage you to get those things done.
And you can get that latest guide by going to the www.risingphoenixbusinesscommunity.com site. And you can get all the information on all of these and the latest version by just putting your email in there, and also submitting stories of inspiration or bottlenecks you want to do. So you want to take us out with some BFOs, Tom Corrigan?
We do finish each week with a BFO. It's a blinding flash of the obvious, or an aha, or gosh, that really affected my thinking, or however you want to express it. And you can pop yours either in the chat box or unmute yourself and jump in.
I was fascinated by the idea that only 8 to 15% of people have their own business now, where not used to be 90% had their own. I wonder how they all did, since entrepreneurship seems to be sort of a unique, not everybody has it, but maybe that's just because we've been conditioned.
Exactly. Yeah. For thousands of years, we did just fine until the factories came around and taught us that we were stupid and lazy.
Speak for yourself.
Oh, sorry.
Mindset adjustment for the positive. Yep. What else? What else are you going to take away from today?
It seems to me that as small business owners, if we really concentrate on how to work in cooperation with each other as co-ops or whatever type of organizational structure we can build business to business, that'll actually kind of wind up being a model for the future in how, large corporations can enable their employees to be essentially small business owners and reorganize in that method.
Thanks, Chris.
I'm taking away, Josh, something you said at the very beginning, which is that the new normal puts us in a receiving mode, like we don't have a chance to impact the future. And I want to impact the future. So good reminder.
Christy said we have a need to strive for collaborative leadership while allowing space for our employees to be human. Thanks, Christy.
Work out to energize
me as well, and that is, I'm not a victim. The future's not just going to happen to me. I'm still in my power, so I get to help create whatever I'm stepping into.
Somebody else was going to say something.
Me, I just wrote it in the chat bar. Work ought to energize us.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you.
And turn in your resignation if somebody's asking to spy on you with the nanny cam all day long. Right? Find something else to do. So, how important is community, Chuck and Tom, during this time?
I think that community becomes more and more important. I find that when we're under pressure, we tend to hide because we start listening to the negative, self-talk that comes up and say, well, you're the only one dealing with this, and everybody else has got it together, and everybody else is smarter than you, and everybody else. And the problem is, and there's a little motto that's really helped me in life, and that is, stop comparing your insides to everybody else's outsides. What you think they're doing and how well they have it off, everybody's struggling with the same stuff. And community is built on saying, I don't know.
Or the new version would be, stop comparing your insights to everyone else's Facebook and Instagram.
Yes. Right. So thanks for being here today. Thanks for making yourself vulnerable in small groups and talking about the important things in life, the important things in business. Many of us are part of 3 to 5 clubs. If you want to know more about that, just go.
Yeah, and in the theme of July, it's freedom mapping. So the only way to get off the treadmill is to freedom map or process map to get freedom, so that we can. And so please, if you'd like to join us for July, you can email us at grow@3to5club.com, and you can visit in person or virtually, right? And so thanks, Josh, so much for bringing what you brought today. And happy 4th of July, everyone. We will be here on July 6th, so we hope you'll join us.
Thanks, Chuck.
Yeah, we'll have special fireworks on July 6th.
Yeah, special fireworks. We'll bring,
There
bring
you
some
go.
sparklers.
Thanks for taking the time to invest in yourself and your business, and we'll see you again next week.